Greetings, TheWarOwl greets you. So you may have noticed last week some rather major changes to Counter-Strike Global Offensive. One of the largest requests from the community is an overhaul of the movement system of CSGO. It has long felt fairly slippery, like the player was skating on ice. It made it very difficult to line up properly at different positions. It made it easy to avoid fire by simply hitting A and D over and over again. For the most part, many players felt it detracted from the skill ceiling and made the game less enjoyable to play. There have been tweaks to the movement values as a result. The player now stops faster, accelerates slower, and has more friction. It sounds a bit strange, but you can definitely feel the difference in-game. After playing with it for about a week now, I can safely say that these movement changes feel so much better. It nerfs the ability for players to constantly avoid getting shot, which is something else we'll get to a little bit later, and it makes it easier to line up properly where you want to be, what little tiny pixel corners you want to look at. At least from my perspective, playing the game feels smoother, and as a result, more enjoyable. Like a woman. Many folks are wondering how this will affect playstyle. It's interesting because at the same time it makes it easier to tap shoot because enemies can't avoid fire as easily, but at the same time more difficult. I think this is actually going to nerf tap shooting because a tap shooting technique involves moving back and forth as well to avoid fire. And this also brings up the next part of the movement update, something that I think is the more major, the tagging. Tagging is a change to a player's movement when they get hit with a shot. Basically, bullets slow you down. They're heavy. When they get in you, you can't move as fast. Now, the faster you get shot, the more you get tagged. So that's like the rate of fire hitting you is how much slower you are and how you can't really move. You get that, I can't go sort of feeling. It doesn't matter where you get hit at this point as well. Also, the speed you run, depending on the weapon you are holding, determines your tagging as well. This is actually quite fascinating, to the effect where you might want to pull out your knife when you're running away to avoid fire, so if you get shot, you won't get tagged as much and you might be able to get away. It seems like it's such a minute change, but let's be honest, we know why it is this way. We know why they've changed it. It's to buff the submachine guns. This became painfully obvious when you notice that armor penetration values of submachine guns have increased by up to 20%. For the longest time, submachine guns in CSGO have been useless. When this update hit, I was in the process of making a submachine gun tutorial. I wrote it, voiced it, was getting footage for it, started editing it. The tutorials I make take a long time to make, and I carefully research every aspect of it to make sure I don't make any mistakes, even though I usually do. Well, now I have to throw it out and start all over again, because the submachine guns have changed big time. They might, even now, be viable. Gasp. I would say that at this point, the UMP is a viable purchase in competitive. It'll be interesting to see if higher level players adapt submachine gun purchase strategies. Now don't freak out about the P90. The P90 is more expensive than the Galil and the FAMAS, and doesn't give the extra kill reward of submachine guns. It's not an eco weapon in the slightest. Generally, you're deciding between an AK-47, M4, or a P90. So just think of it like a rifle. Don't even worry about it. Now, I say the UMP is viable because it is cheap and still as effective a weapon as the MP7. It's sort of like the difference between the main rifles, the AK and the M4, and the more expensive counterparts like the SG or the AUG. The AK and the M4 are good enough. It doesn't really warrant, in most people's minds, the extra investment, though personally it is a little bit strange that more players do not purchase the SG. It's only 300 more. It's not really that much more expensive, and it is more effective. Is the benefits of the SG worth the extra money? Another big change from this tagging update, besides buffing the old SMGs, is that the hand grenades are now infinitely more useful. When you just get barely nudged by the explosion of a fragmentation grenade, it tags you. They can be used to limit movement, sort of like debuffing the enemy before pushing in. I can also see AWPing taking a hit, as AWPers can get tagged quite heavily given the slow movement speed of the AWP. Despite the lag of an increased rate of fire, quick switching with the AWP would make sense to give increased mobility. and less tagging. So you're using an op, you're looking down the corner, some guy is coming around the corner, gonna shoot you, you shoot your shot, and now you quick switch to the knife, strafe back, quick switch back, and strafe back out again. So if you get hit, you have the knife out and you don't get tagged as much. All of these things seem like very minute changes, but they are major when you play Counter-Strike at a higher level. The game has really fundamentally changed, I think, for the better. The movement feels so much better at this point, the tagging makes sense, an attempt to make the SMGs actually used, it's all fairly exciting. Either way, I'm the WarOwl, and I still have no closer.